When The Sopranos first hit screens in 1999, it changed television forever. They made us laugh, they shocked us, and they terrified us. But time has taken its toll, and some of these familiar faces are no longer with us. What really happened after the cameras stopped rolling, and where are they now? Let's find out. Tony Sirico as Paulie Walnuts Gualtieri. If you loved The Sopranos, you remember Paulie Walnuts. Sharp suits, sharper tongue, and a loyalty that could turn brutal in a heartbeat. Tony Sirico was 57 when he first played him in 1999, and he knew the role better than anyone because parts of it came straight from his own life. Born July 29, 1942, in Brooklyn, Sirico grew up on the streets and lived a real gangster's life before turning to acting. He was arrested 28 times for crimes ranging from robbery to drug possession, and even served 20 months in prison. Gambling, smoking, and brushes with the law haunted him well into his career, giving his on-screen violence an authenticity that could not be faked. Despite the tough exterior, his personal life carried its own drama. Sirico never married but had 2 children, Joanne and Richard, whom he fiercely loved. As age caught up with him, dementia and heart problems stripped away the vitality that once made him larger than life. Fans who adored his wisecracks and brutality were left shaken to learn that their favorite mobster was quietly fading in a Florida care facility. On July 8, 2022, Sirico died at 79 in Fort Lauderdale. His net worth was estimated at $8 million, mostly from The Sopranos and films like Goodfellas. At his funeral in Brooklyn, the streets filled with mourners, and as his coffin was lowered, it felt like the final curtain call for Paulie Walnuts, the real gangster-turned-television legend. James Gandolfini as Tony Soprano. You probably remember James Gandolfini as Tony Soprano, the mob boss who changed television forever in 1999. He was 38 when he first played the role, and overnight he became the face of a cultural phenomenon. But away from the screen, his life was far darker than fans ever knew. James Joseph Gandolfini Jr. was born on September 18, 1961, in Westwood, New Jersey, to strict Italian immigrant parents. That tough childhood gave him discipline, but it also left deep scars. When fame came, his marriage to Marcy Wodarski cracked under the pressure, fueled by fights, addiction, and the suffocating spotlight. By 2002, the divorce was final, leaving behind heartbreak and a son, Michael. He tried again. In 2008, he married model Deborah Lynn in Hawaii, and in 2012 they had a daughter. For a moment it looked like he had found peace, but his private battles only grew worse. Alcohol, drugs, depression. Friends staged interventions, productions stalled, and those who loved him saw a man collapsing under the weight of his own success. Then came the shock. On June 19, 2013, while vacationing in Rome, Gandolfini died of a massive heart attack. He was just 51. His son Michael was the one who found him on the hotel bathroom floor, a moment of horror that no child should ever face. At his death, his fortune stood at $70 million, but what lingered was not the money. It was the haunting image of a giant taken far too soon. Edie Falco as Carmela Soprano. Edie Falco was 36 when she first appeared as Carmela Soprano in The Sopranos, 1999. As Tony's wife, she embodied a woman torn between loyalty, faith, and the moral rot of mob life. For many, she became the quiet heart of the series, a character who revealed how violence destroys families from the inside out. Born July 5, 1963, in Brooklyn, New York, Falco's real life was no less dramatic. In 2003, at the height of The Sopranos' success, she was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. She endured chemotherapy and radiation while still filming, hiding her illness from the public until she was strong enough to speak about it. The image of Carmela holding the family together while Falco secretly fought for her own life is one of television's great untold stories. Her struggles didn't end there. Falco had long battled alcoholism, finally getting sober in the early 1990s, and later relied heavily on caffeine and work to fill the void. She never married, but in 2005 adopted a son, and in 2008 a daughter, choosing family on her own terms. Relationships came and went, most famously a brief affair with Stanley Tucci, yet she always stood fiercely independent, surviving storms that might have crushed others. Now, in 2025, Falco is 62 years old and still working steadily, from Nurse Jackie to the Avatar sequels. Her net worth is estimated at $16 million. For fans, she remains more than just Carmela Soprano. She is living proof that resilience can triumph over addiction, heartbreak, and even cancer. Nancy Marchand as Livia Soprano. Nancy Marchand was 71 when she first appeared as Livia Soprano in 1999. On screen, she was Tony's cruel, manipulative mother. Off-screen, she was a veteran actress with decades of theater behind her and a body already failing. Her private life carried heavy grief. In 1999, while she was battling lung cancer and emphysema, her husband of nearly 50 years, actor Paul Sparrer, died of cancer too. Left widowed, she pushed herself back to set, delivering venomous lines as Livia even while struggling for breath between takes. Those who knew her said the pain behind her eyes was real. She was channeling her own suffering into the role. Her health collapsed quickly. By season 2, she was too sick to continue, and when she passed away, the production had to rely on digital trickery to close her character's story. For the cast, it was devastating. They lost not just a co-star, but the matriarch who anchored the show's darkest heart. On June 18, 2000, one day before her 72nd birthday, Nancy Marchand died in Connecticut. She left behind 3 children and a net worth of $5 million. Fans still remember her final gift, a chilling portrait of Livia Soprano, filmed while she was fighting for her last breaths. Lorraine Bracco as Dr. Jennifer Melfi. You remember her as Dr. Jennifer Melfi, Tony Soprano's calm but unshakable therapist. Lorraine Bracco was 45 when The Sopranos began in 1999, and her performance gave the show its conscience. But away from the screen, her own life was spiraling into something far more painful. Bracco's love story with Harvey Keitel turned into a nightmare. Their 12-year relationship collapsed in accusations and custody battles over their daughter, Stella. She lost millions in legal fees, but worse, she lost her sense of stability. The endless courtroom fights dragged her into deep depression. At her lowest point, she admitted she tried to take her own life. The woman who helped Tony untangle his demons could barely survive her own. Her second marriage, to actor Edward James Olmos, ended in divorce too. By then, she was drained, emotionally, financially, physically, and yet, slowly, she found her way back. Sobriety, Buddhism, karate, and the decision to adopt motherhood on her own terms became her anchors. Now, at 71, Bracco is still standing. With a net worth of $14 million, she works, writes, and speaks openly about survival. For fans, her story is shocking, but also inspiring. She lived through the darkness she once only acted on screen. Frank Vincent as Phil Leotardo. Few villains in The Sopranos were as unforgettable as Phil Leotardo. Frank Vincent, already a legend from Goodfellas and Casino, joined the show at 65 and brought years of lived experience to the role. On screen, he was fierce, cold, and merciless. Off-screen, however, Vincent was fighting a battle that no one could win for him. He was born April 15, 1937 in Massachusetts and raised in Jersey, where music first defined his life. But decades of performing, smoking, and constant pressure wore down his body. By the time he was playing mob bosses, his heart was fragile. Behind the sharp suits and commanding presence, Vincent was quietly struggling with an illness that stripped away the strength fans thought he'd always have. In early September 2017, disaster struck. After suffering a heart attack, Vincent underwent open-heart surgery. Doctors tried to save him, but complications came quickly. For a man who had once stared down Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci on screen, it was a cruel ending, sudden, quiet, and irreversible. His death shocked fans who had always seen him as untouchable. On September 13th, 2017, Frank Vincent died at the age of 78. His net worth was about $5 million, but no dollar figure could measure the loss. At his funeral, friends and fans alike remembered him with the words that defined one of his most iconic scenes: "Go home and get your shine box." It was both a farewell and a reminder of the larger-than-life legacy he left behind. Michael Imperioli as Christopher Moltisanti. When fans think of The Sopranos, they remember Christopher Moltisanti, the restless nephew whose hunger for power was matched only by his spiral into addiction. Michael Imperioli was just 33 when he stepped into that role in 1999, and the performance won him an Emmy. But what most people never realized was how much of that suffering mirrored his own private battles. Imperioli was born on March 26, 1966, in Mount Vernon, New York. Behind his sharp rise in Hollywood, cocaine nearly destroyed everything. The drug that seemed glamorous in the world of late-night clubs turned into a nightmare at home. His marriage to Victoria Klebowski was tested to its limits, his role as a father nearly torn away, and his health hanging by a thread. He later admitted that he feared losing not just his career, but his entire family. The chaos he portrayed on screen was heartbreakingly real. Finding a way back meant starting over. Rehab gave him the first step, but it was Buddhism that offered him the strength to stay clean. Martial arts with his children gave him discipline, while writing and podcasting gave him purpose. Slowly, the man once defined by addiction became a husband, a father, and a survivor. Every role since, from Goodfellas to The White Lotus, has carried the weight of that fight. Now, at 59, Imperioli is still working, still thriving, and worth an estimated $20 million. Yet his greatest achievement is not wealth or fame. It is the fact that he rebuilt the life he almost lost. His story stands as a reminder. Even in the darkest spiral, survival is possible if you refuse to give in. John Heard as Vin Makazian. John Heard's role in The Sopranos was brief but unforgettable. As Vin Makazian, the broken, corrupt cop, he brought a sadness that felt painfully real. Heard was 54 when he played the part in 1999, and in many ways, the character reflected his own life. John Heard was born on March 7, 1946, in Washington, D.C. His marriages were a chain of heartbreaks. His union with Margot Kidder in 1979 collapsed after just 6 days. His long relationship with actress Melissa Leo ended in violence and court battles over custody of their son. Later, with Sharon Heard, he tried to rebuild, but tragedy struck in 2016 when their 22-year-old son died unexpectedly. His final marriage, to Lana Pritchard in 2010, ended after only 7 months. Each failure deepened his depression and left scars that never fully healed. Illness added another layer of suffering. Heard struggled with hypertension and heart disease, conditions worsened by stress, grief, and years of personal turmoil. Friends said he seemed to carry his pain quietly, but it showed, in his tired eyes, in his restless spirit. Like Makazian on screen, he looked like a man fighting a war he could never win. In July 2017, Heard died of a heart attack at the age of 72, just months after back surgery. His net worth was around $3 million, but money could not shield him from the weight of loss. To fans, he remains the loving father from Home Alone and the tragic cop from The Sopranos. To those who knew his story, he was also a man undone by heartbreak and illness long before his final day. Steven Van Zandt as Silvio Dante. You remember him? The stone-faced consigliere, Silvio Dante. Steven Van Zandt was 49 when The Sopranos began in 1999. For most fans, it was a surprise to see Bruce Springsteen's guitarist transform into one of TV's most unforgettable mobsters. But while he looked unshakable on screen, his real life carried its own storms. Steven Van Zandt was born on November 22, 1950, in Winthrop, Massachusetts, and grew up in New Jersey. In 1982, he married actress Maureen Santoro in a wedding straight out of a fairy tale, Bruce Springsteen as best man, Little Richard officiating, Percy Sledge singing. Yet the years that followed were not always happy. His outspoken fight against apartheid in the 1980s put him under FBI surveillance. For him and Maureen, that meant a home life filled with tension, fear of phone taps, and the heavy weight of political backlash. What the public saw as glamorous activism was, inside the marriage, years of stress and sacrifice. Age brought another fight, his own health. In 2025, at 75, Van Zandt fell ill during Springsteen's global tour. What he thought was food poisoning turned into emergency surgery for appendicitis in Spain. For a man who had spent decades on stage, the sudden weakness was shocking. Fans who always saw him as larger than life were forced to face the truth. Even Silvio Dante, even Little Steven, was vulnerable. Today, with an estimated net worth of $80 million, Van Zandt is celebrated as both rock icon and TV star. Streets in New Jersey now carry his name. But more powerful than fame or money is the story of survival. A man who balanced music, marriage, activism, and illness, and somehow kept standing. Joseph Saravo as Johnny Boy Soprano. Johnny Boy Soprano appeared only in flashbacks, but Joseph Saravo made him unforgettable, the father whose shadow hung over Tony's life. Saravo was 42 when he first took the role in 1999, already celebrated for his stage work. But his private life became dominated not by fame, but by a long, merciless illness. Born March 11, 1955 in Washington, D.C., Saravo lived for the stage, performing in Jersey Boys thousands of times. Then, in 2017, he received devastating news: Stage 4 prostate cancer. The disease spread quickly to his colon. Treatments were brutal, round after round that drained his strength and left him fighting simply to get through the day. For 4 years, his life revolved around hospital visits and surgeries. Friends recalled his quiet determination, how he kept smiling through pain that would have broken others. Behind that fight was the unspoken sorrow of lost time, time away from family, from the stage, from the life he had built. Every performance he managed to give in those years carried the weight of someone refusing to surrender. But cancer is a relentless enemy, and by 2021, it had left his body too weak to continue. On April 11, 2021, Saravo died at just 66. His net worth was modest, about $1 million, but what he left behind was far greater. The memory of an actor who poured every ounce of himself into his craft, even as illness consumed him. For the theater world, his death was a shocking loss, a reminder that even the brightest talents can be stolen too soon. Dominic Chianese as Corrado Jr. Soprano. You know him as Uncle Jr., the wily old fox who always seemed one step ahead. But Dominic Chianese was already 68 when The Sopranos began in 1999, already a veteran actor. But that role made him unforgettable. And yet, his real story has been one of heartbreak, quiet battles, and unexpected resilience. Born February 24, 1931, in the Bronx, Chianese carried the grit of a working-class immigrant family. His personal life, though, was filled with loss. His first 2 marriages ended in painful divorces, leaving him struggling with loneliness while raising children and chasing an uncertain career. Later, he faced an even deeper wound: the death of a wife to illness. That kind of grief does not fade easily. It shadows every part of daily life, even when the world only sees your success. On top of that, his years of heavy smoking left scars on his health, constant reminders of a past he could never fully escape. But he refused to let tragedy define him. Music and philanthropy became his anchors. In 2010, he received the Ellis Island Medal of Honor for his humanitarian work, proof that even a man marked by sorrow could give back with strength. With his third wife, Jane Pitson, he finally found stability and companionship, a safe harbor after years of storm. Now, at 94, Chianese is worth around $15 million and remains a living legend. Fans may see Uncle Junior, but behind the character stands a man who endured failed marriages, illness, and crushing loss, and still found a way to rise again. Tony Lip as Carmine Lupertazzi. Fans loved him as Carmine Lupertazzi, the smooth New York mob boss who held power with a smile. Tony Lip was 71 when he joined The Sopranos in 2001, and his performance added old-school weight to the show. But his life off-screen carried tragedies that few ever saw. Born July 30th, 1930, in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, Lip, real name Frank Anthony Vallelonga, lived a life full of glamour and heartbreak. His marriage to Dolores Vallelonga lasted more than 4 decades, but in 1999 she died, leaving him devastated. As if that loss weren't enough, one of his sons later died in a tragic accident, compounding the grief. Behind the tough exterior of Carmine was a man who had buried the people he loved most. Health was another battle. Years of smoking and a hard lifestyle eventually caught up with him. On January 4th, 2013, while playing golf, he suffered a stroke and never recovered. The man who had once hosted Sinatra and Bennett at the Copacabana, who inspired the Oscar-winning film Green Book, was gone at 82. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at just $2 million, modest for someone with such a legendary presence. But money wasn't his true legacy. For fans, Tony Lip will always be remembered as the actor who brought Carmine Lupertazzi to life, and as the man whose real-life stories were just as dramatic and just as heartbreaking as any mob drama. Aida Turturro as Janice Soprano. When you think of Janice Soprano, you think of chaos, drama, and betrayal, the perfect older sister to Tony. Aida Turturro was 37 when she joined The Sopranos in 1999, and her performance was so sharp that it earned her Emmy nominations. But off-screen, her real fight was not with family. It was with her own body. Born September 25, 1962 in Brooklyn, Turturro found success in film and television. But in 2001, her life changed forever with a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. The disease forced her into years of managing blood sugar, medication, and the consequences of unhealthy eating habits. Behind the laughter and fame was exhaustion, an actress trying to balance work while carrying a hidden illness that never gave her a break. The condition brought more struggles than she ever let on. She admitted to falling into bad habits, comfort food, sugar, and stress eating, that made her fight even harder. It wasn't just physical pain, but the emotional toll of living with a chronic illness in an industry obsessed with perfection. That private battle often mirrored Janice's on-screen turbulence, unpredictable, draining, and impossible to ignore. Now 63, Aida Turturro has a net worth of about $5 million. She continues to work steadily, but her biggest legacy is her openness. By sharing her health struggles, she became a voice for awareness, showing fans that even through illness and difficulty, strength and humor can still shine. John Costello as Jim Johnny Cakes Witowski. He wasn't in many episodes, but fans never forgot him. Johnny Cakes, the lover of Vito. John Costello joined The Sopranos in 2006 at 45, bringing warmth and humanity to a controversial storyline. But behind that character was an actor carrying a silent storm. Born November 8, 1961 in Brooklyn, Costello spent 11 years as a firefighter before turning to acting. On the outside, he was strong, dependable, the kind of man people leaned on. Inside, he was battling depression that few ever saw. Friends later admitted he hid it well, showing up for rehearsals and performances, even as his spirit was crumbling. There were no high-profile marriages, no Hollywood scandals, only loneliness, the weight of fading opportunities, and the constant fight against his own thoughts. In late 2008, while performing in the play Gang of Seven, Costello's inner struggle reached its breaking point. On December 16th, he took his own life with a gun. He was just 47. His body wasn't found until 2 days later in his Brooklyn home. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at only $500,000. But his funeral told a deeper story. Fellow firefighters and actors, including Steve Buscemi and Sopranos co-star Joseph Ganiscoli, gathered to say goodbye. For fans, it was a heartbreaking reminder that even those who appear the strongest can be fighting battles too heavy to bear. Jamie Lynn Sigler as Meadow Soprano. When The Sopranos began in 1999, Jamie Lynn Sigler was only 18. As Meadow, Tony Soprano's daughter, she carried innocence, rebellion, and the burden of growing up inside a mafia family. Fans watched her blossom on screen, but off-screen she was already fighting a battle no teenager should face. Born May 15, 1981, in Jericho, New York, Sigler's life changed forever in 2002 when she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. She was just 20. What began with sudden paralysis was first misdiagnosed as Lyme disease. For years, she lived in secrecy, terrified of losing roles if the truth got out. Every Broadway performance, every Sopranos scene, came with the hidden weight of a body slowly betraying her. Behind the smiles and red carpets, there were days she could barely walk. Her personal life was no less turbulent. At 21, she married her manager, Abraxas Discala, but the marriage quickly soured, ending in divorce 2 years later. Later relationships, actors, athletes, restaurateurs, came and went until she found stability with baseball player Cutter Dykstra. They married in 2016 and built a family together, raising 2 sons. But even as a wife and mother, she still faced the daily exhaustion of MS, pushing through fatigue and pain while trying to be strong for her children. Now at 44, Jamie Lynn Sigler is worth around $10 million. She continues to act and, in 2024, launched a podcast with Christina Applegate, bonding over their shared struggle with MS. For fans, she's no longer just Meadow Soprano. She's a symbol of courage, a reminder that even in the darkest illness, life can still be lived with honesty and hope. Looking back at the cast of The Sopranos, we see a mix of brilliance, fame, and tragedy. Yet through their work, they remain alive in the memories of fans around the world. Which of these actors do you still miss today? Drop your answer below, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more stories from behind the screen.